to. The sort of, this high speculative price goes down, the market fails, then they get back together, they all fly to Geneva, and they agree to do this again. This obviously happened, two big price spikes in history. There was, they jacked up the world price, then it failed, they overproduced, then they did it again. They had big members that weren't part of OPEC. So Mexico and Russia were never members of OPEC. OPEC's like Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia. Interestingly, later we have the Iran-Iraq war, where two members of OPEC are trying to kill each other. Then we have Iraq invading Kuwait, so that's different members of OPEC trying to fight. So when you can get different members of a cartel to fight each other, their strength and ability to meet as a cartel are less. So here is there's these two price spikes that are ginormous. This is the price of oil normalized over one period. I forget what the year is, the base year. But these are these two big price spikes, huge effects on the U.S. economy, huge, sort of provoking a recession at the time. And then it falls apart, and then oil's going along, and then it's getting really low here. Right around here, the price of oil was getting very low. And Hugo Chavez was like, come on, guys, let's all get back together. Let's get back in the room. Let's try and restrict production again. And then after 2001, basically, then we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, and the price of oil's just basically been so high they don't need to worry about OPEC anymore. This is a big run-up before the recession in 2008. This is the recession in 2008. You can see how crazy that is. That recession caused such a big swing. But we're basically way up above. We're up in OPEC cartel land now. And we have a whole bunch of different producers. We have the U.S. as a big producer. So up here at the prices we're at now, OPEC doesn't really need to do much because the price of oil is so high anyways. So how this works out in the real world is interesting because if you're Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, no one's going to stop you from going to a hotel in Geneva and setting the price of oil or quantity of oil. But inside the United States, this is illegal to set prices or set quantities. It's called collusion. Collusion, going to hotel rooms and setting price and quantities is illegal. The SEC can investigate you, the Department of Justice can prosecute you. But price leadership, like I'm just going to tease out this high price and see if my co-oligopolist, the other person who's setting their prices and facing downward supply, what if they stick with me at this high price? What if we met on the golf course, nobody saw us, we agreed on the price, and we sort of quietly set the market price? This is very common. So market prices, we can show that they're above what they should be, but we can't prove that they work together. So the textbook market is a huge one, right? This textbook for the class was like $150 as a retail price or something. That's crazy, right? I mean, we could all press a button and self-publish that book for $30. So this is there's a few big textbook publishers that know they have a downward sloping demand curve. They're going to keep this rare thing, textbooks, to themselves. As we talked about cell phone plans, AT&T and Verizon are basically following each other.
Wait, you're telling me the high prices of textbooks are really accurate?
Yes, definitely. For sure. You didn't know that already?
I didn't know that already. No, maybe.
You should be angry. It's terrible.
Support Amazon.
Support Amazon. I mean, Amazon, yeah, right. So support Amazon or support reselling or textbook renting. There's new modes out there, like renting your textbook for a semester or something like that.
This will cost $170
To rent? See, then it's like, that's crazy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So then the other part of the racket is the guy who usually teaches this class is the author of the textbook. So that's the even stranger part. I'm not a textbook author. Someday you can throw eggs at me. But as I talked about cell phone plans, so what is the value of a gigabyte of wireless data? It costs them zero. Their infrastructure's out there. They're creating this cost of you using a wireless network. They're just trying to figure out how they can, price discriminate and get as many people to pay as much as they can for internet. Airline tickets, you see this a ton. People that fly, there's a whole bunch of examples of this for airline tickets, but airline prices will often be the same, and they're matching each other in different markets. What's crazy about airline tickets is there's just thousands of prices. There's thousands of destinations. There's different classes. There's so many different airline prices going on. But we see that prices go together, obviously. And a big one that's recently is the market for ebooks. I don't know if you guys have heard about this court case, but the Department of Justice successfully found that Apple was setting prices in the ebook market last summer. And so they said, they showed that Apple had been colluding with the ebook publishers to set the prices. There's 6 big publishers, I think, that were found guilty, and Apple was setting a price with them, and then Apple would get 30%. So that, Apple admitted that they were getting 30% of the price. Apple has so much money, right? So Apple ebooks this is something for like 2.5 years. They found that Apple ebooks were $12.99, and the price before this collusion happened and after this collusion happened was $9.99. So you'd be like, there's $2.99. How many books were sold? And there's 30%. It's not that hard to think about how you can see where the triangle is of them getting this consumer surplus out. The current lawsuit that's now happening, so now there's a class action and states are suing. This is a federal finding that they were colluding in the market, but now they're suing Apple for something like $800 million, which is crazy, like $1 billion for 2 years of collusion in this market. But we think that Apple has enough cash. Like for them, $1 billion is like sitting in the bank, right? All right, so there were here's the number, 129 million ebooks, and $3 times that number, and then Apple's getting 30% of that, right? So it's not like we could do a calculation. I had one that had the state by state, had California. All right, so that's the ebook market. And then there's also cases where there's market leadership, but people are using market power to take over market share. So there's going to be an oligopoly with big companies, and instead of fighting about revenue, instead of fighting about profits, they're fighting about sales. They want to take over in terms of sales. So there's also market power cases where big firms are using their market power to take over more and more market share. So by getting more market share, then they'll have an even bigger chunk of the demand curve. And usually this is either drive out weaker competitors or also buy out weaker competitors. There's 2 big strategies here. One thing that's happened over the last decade or 2 in this is Walmart, which we live in sort of a big city, like Walmart's another big box stores, but in rural America, Walmart has moved in and taken over retail sales for like huge geographical areas, and there's downtowns and mom and pop businesses or whatever that was previously there, they're sort of boarded up. So Walmart had a plan to go through rural America and take over retailing things. And they were all about increasing their sales. They made plenty of profits in the long run by driving costs down, but another part of their thing was we're going to move in, we're going to take over the bulk of retail sales in this area. We need everyone to come to our stores, their model. So a big issue here in oligopoly in cartels is, can people enter into this market? And there's a term that we say contestable. Can other firms come into a market and start selling into it? What are the barriers to entry to the market? And this is why it's really tough in oligopoly. There's a whole bunch of different cases. A lot of times there are regulations. So government regulation sometimes can keep an oligopoly in place. You have to buy a license. You have to have a certain technology. You have to have been in place. There's a lot of grandfathering of older things. So in the case of pollution, in the Swedish paper mill case, there was the older plants had the right to pollute, and newer plants had a very high cost to enter. They had the right to use the technology they were currently using. Newer plants had to use a much more expensive technology. So in that Swedish paper mill case, there was like a kink on the curve, and this regulation favoring older plants kept them in control of the paper market. There's in international trade, we have what's called non-tariff barriers. There's food safety regulations. There's a whole bunch of different ways that countries keep other countries' industries out that are not just putting taxes on them. They try to protect agriculture. You can't sell your agriculture here because it's not safe. It's not up to some food safety thing. A lot of people would say the GMO case is really big. So the U.S. has widely adopted GMOs for its basic grains of corn and soy that it exports to the world. Certain countries could be like, we're not going to accept shipments of GMO corn or soybeans, and in doing that, they're basically protecting their domestic producers. So there's a regulation about something about how seeds are grown, but that's affecting who's going to control domestic markets. One other area that we have is called monopolistic competition. And this is an area where there could be many buyers and sellers. There could be no barriers to entry, but there still could be imperfect information because firms are going to have some way that they're going to try and differentiate their product from another firm's product. So firms might be selling something that's basically identical, but through branding or through some sort of differentiation, they can influence the market price so that this firm could raise their price and not lose all their customers. So we think in the perfect competition case, if you have a demand and a supply, if you raise your price anywhere above this price, people are going to go elsewhere. People are just going to switch to the other product. But monopolistic competition, there's some way that you've differentiated yourself so you see downward sloping demand. The differences between your product and somebody else's product could be minor, and they may only, this is important, it may only exist in the minds of the consumers. So this is like branding and advertising, right? So if we say we're going to create some difference, and we are the only one who can sell you this kind of toothpaste with the sparkly extra teeth cleaning flavor that's got little green sparkles in it that nobody else has. You have to buy my toothpaste. Anybody can produce toothpaste at a similar cost, but you have to buy mine, right? And we live in this society, right? Huge expenditures on advertising things that are basically similar, but you want to have brand loyalty. Why do you want to buy their one, right? We go into the store and there's billions of different brands looking at us. We're going to create differences in the mind of consumer so that there'll be a downward sloping demand curve. We have things that are totally, so, in the case of aspirin, it's sort of determined by the government what's in the aspirin pill. It's a regulated thing. But you can go in the drugstore and you can pay 50% more for like a brand name bottle of aspirin than a store name bottle of aspirin. It's like legally required to be the same, but we will pay more because like that, their aspirin's going to make me feel better, right? There's some quality signal to it. Right, so if you're buying the thing that's going to make you feel better, that's the whole drugstore is full of those things, right? The whole drugstore has a giant placebo effect. Brands of beer, are you going to buy Budweiser beer or Busch beer? It's probably the same thing in a different can, but they have a price point for everybody along that curve, right? And Budweiser versus Miller Beer, two different companies. They're probably the same thing in a different can, but we're going to fight and give different promotions and have different scantily clad women in different commercials or something, to get people to do it. Coca-Cola, you could see, I could go to a busy corner, and there'll be 4 different gas stations on different corners, right? And for some reason, you go to Chevron and not, Unical or whatever it is. They branded you to think something about that brand of gasoline or giving you a card. Importantly, in monopolistic competition, the way we think about it is, in the short run, we can have economic profits. In the short run, we'll have downward sloping demand. In the long run, the demand curve will go down. In the long run, people will probably shift. In the short run, we can trick people into sticking with our brand. And then what happens is that from a societal perspective, each firm is producing less than the total production. They have the capacity to produce more, but they're all trying to segment their markets and produce a little bit less and go a little bit higher in terms of what their quantities are, what their prices are. So if there was perfect competition, there would be less firms, and they would all be producing more. But we like that there's more firms because that's, if we ended up shaking out and having very few firms, then we would have true monopoly and not monopolistic competition. So let's just go back to our monopoly drawing. So we have demand and marginal revenue. We had some point where, say this is like a very long term, marginal cost, average cost. So long term is getting lower and lower. In a short term, we would have a marginal cost and an average cost where, let me make this bigger. I think I'm blowing this because I'm flustered. It's the end here. So in this one, this is the short term. We have a big amount of profit that they're making. So in the long term, average costs are going to go up and demand is going to go down. So the size of this bubble in the longer term will go down. I'm sorry, this is a really terrible picture. I either need multiple colors or... So importantly, they're setting the prices on a downward sloping demand. Long term, if their prices are too high, their demand is going to go down. People are going to switch out of this product. Let's say there's a point that is the minimum of the average cost. Let's just do one of these things happening. I was trying to do too many things at the same time. And say long term, we'll say the demand would go down to the minimum average cost. But short term, they can stay above the long-term average cost. So there'll be a cube of profit that will get shrunk down in the long term, but in short term, they can keep advertising, branding, differentiating their product, creating a separate demand curve just for their product. Keep pushing that demand curve up so that it's just about our product. We've just introduced a new special sparkle that's purple sparkles in the toothpaste this year, and it's better than the toothpaste last year because it's going to make your breath fresher or something. I don't know. So we're going to keep advertising and branding and introducing features so that we're still facing downward sloping demand. Long run, we're going to end up in average cost curve, but short run, it will go away. All right, can you guys bear with me for like 2 more minutes? Okay, monopsony is the last thing. There could be a single buyer for inputs. Monopsony is on the input market. Oops. Talking too much, teaching too little. All right, the monopsonist faces the upward sloping supply curve instead of a flat price for the inputs. So let me just show this graphically. There's going to be a marginal resource cost. So just as monopolists, as they increased quantity production was affecting supply, the monopsonist is going to affect the price of the input that they're purchasing. So each additional unit that they purchase of the input is going to cost them more. So there could be one big lumber company buying all of the wood that's coming into it. There could be one town that's hiring everybody, the one company town, the coal mine that's hiring all the coal miners. You could say it's Walmart because they're the single biggest buyer. You could say it's the defense industry or the space industry selling to the government. There's only one person buying rockets. There's only one person buying stealth bombers. So we can sort of manipulate prices. And then there's also for farmers that are selling into where there's a single buyer. So let's say this is the market for an input. The dollars, sorry for going over here. This is the quantity of the input that we're selling. And we have, within a firm, we have what's called the marginal revenue product. So this is how much units of input are going to lead to units of income. So, and then this is, say, the firm is buying. So usually the firm just sets this equal to the price of the input. But now the firm is the single buyer, and this is the supply of input, so it's upward sloping. And so as they consume more, they drive their own price up. So this is called the marginal resource cost. And they're going to set the marginal resource cost equal to the marginal revenue product. And this is how much it's going to be worth to the firm of using that input, but they only need to pay down here. If it's a one-company town, if it's the coal mine and there's a bunch of coal miners waiting outside, they can pay this wage to the coal miners because all the coal miners want to work at that coal mine. There's only one company in that town. But to the company, they could be getting a whole bunch. Their marginal revenue product of that unit of input could be a lot higher than the wage they're paying. In a free market setting where the free labor market supply is going to equal demand, they're going to take it. They're going to take a wage rate that's external and set it equal to the marginal revenue product. This was related to our isoquants and our isocost lines. But in a monopsonist case, they're going to be able to restrict how much they use. And so this is how much X they would use at an equilibrium. And this is this monopsonist. They're going to restrict how much of that input they're going to use. They're going to drive the price down. And they're going to take the rents to themselves for that. Sorry for going over. I'll see you on Thursday. Come write me, or if you want to have questions about midterming.